Heavenly Father, I just pray that you will open our hearts and open our minds tonight, God, that we will be able to meet with you. Father, I pray that you will just be glorified tonight. I pray all this in your name. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Kelly. I'm a senior. And tonight I just want to share my story with you guys through telling you the story of my brother Sean. First, I'll give you a little background about who I am. I grew up in the UP, which is the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, for those of you who don't know. And I grew up there my whole life. I'm the youngest of 4 children. So I'll just tell you about my brother Sean. He's 8 years older than me, and so I didn't really have a good, close relationship with him because he's so much older than I was, and he was my half-brother, and so he was gone a lot at his biological father's house, and so I didn't really see him very often. So growing up, we didn't have a very close brother-sister relationship that some siblings may have. Then going into my junior year of high school, it'll actually be 5 years ago on Tuesday, we received the news that my brother, I just skipped a whole bunch of stuff. After my brother graduated, he came to Chicago to study at DeVry University, and he graduated from there with his associates, and he started working in this area. Then, my junior year of high school, we received the news that while my brother was on a business trip in Cincinnati, a man had come up to him, robbed him, and shot him. And so we received this news not knowing anything about the situation. I was told that he may not even live. And so we rushed to Cincinnati, and come to find out, he was shot through the side, and the bullet had torn through many of his organs, his stomach, his kidneys, and his lungs, only to end up next to his spine, and it instantly paralyzed him from the waist down. So for about 6 months, my brother stayed in the rehab center in Chicago, and he was going through a lot of rehabilitation, just trying to get back some of his mobility, some of his strength. Because of what the bullet had done as it went through his body, his upper body strength was very, very poor. He was just sick a lot, and so he had a lot of strength to regain through the whole thing. And so he spent about 6 months in the city, and then he came and moved back home. Now, if you can imagine, he's about 24 years old, and he had lived for 5-6 years here in Chicago on his own, doing anything that he wanted, and all of a sudden, everything was taken away from him: his independence, his strength, and his walking. And so he was left with very, very little, and he came to move home with his parents and me. And so this was a huge deal for Sean. He had to come home and live off of his parents again. So through this time, after we found out about what had happened to Sean, I struggled a lot with understanding what is the goodness of God. Like, how could God be so good if He would allow my brother to be shot? And my brother was not a guy who did all these horrible things. He wasn't this guy who deserved to be shot. And so I struggled with understanding why our God would do that, why He would allow something like that. So that was my first struggle with really understanding the goodness of God. So through all this time while Sean was living at home, he started physical therapy. And so he would go about 3 times a week to physical therapy, and he was gaining a lot of strength. After he had been shot, he was told he had about 1% chance of ever walking again. And while he was going through physical therapy, we actually realized that he was gaining a lot of strength, and he was able to actually walk in leg braces and on parallel bars. He was able to walk around the physical therapy room, which was huge. This was huge for Sean and for us to see all of this growth. But also, along with that, Sean had so many setbacks. Because of what the bullet had done, he had a lot of infections. Infections in his stomach, infections in his spine, infections all over. And they would come every other week, every other month. They were just constant. They would just push him back and push him back and push him back. And then I think it was after, I don't remember when it was, but at one point, Sean was having such incredible back pain, and it was going on for a long time, and the doctors wouldn't really do anything about it. They would just prescribe him more and more medication, and finally it was so bad that my mom rushed into the hospital. Come to find out that he had an infection in his spine that was growing for 3 months. And this infection had deteriorated 3 of his vertebrae. They were gone. And so this is terrible news. He was no longer able to do physical therapy. He stopped doing that. He was losing his strength. But through all this time of turmoil, of pain, I was able to build an incredible relationship with my brother. Sean was the kind of person who could make you laugh even if he was in pain. He was the kind of person who would never let you see if he was hurting or if something was upsetting him. He was just such a fun, loving person that everyone wanted to be around. So then, another one of his setbacks, I came to Trinity, and as I came to Trinity, I was just really growing and developing my faith here at school. And so when I go home, I was still able to build this relationship with Sean, and I was able to challenge him with who God was, and had these great conversations with him, like why would God allow bad things to happen in this world, or why does God allow pain, and what does the forgiveness of God look like? So I was able to have these great conversations with Sean. But going into my sophomore year, Sean had kind of an accident and he broke his leg. Now, for someone who was paralyzed from the waist down, this is a big deal. He was supposed to have a cast because he broke it in 2 places. And because he was in a wheelchair, there was no way he could have a cast. And so Sean was going through this huge issue with anger. He was the angriest person I have ever seen. He was so angry towards God. He was so angry towards the man who shot him. He was so angry towards the doctors, and he was so angry at himself. And this is the hardest thing for me to deal with, because I had to sit there with this man who is yelling at me, yelling at his parents, yelling at God, yelling at doctors. And I had no idea what to do, so I just sat there and listened to him yelling. But then throughout the year, I was able to still develop this relationship with him and continue to show him just who God is and how good God is. And then last February 2009, I was in my suite in Johnson about to study, and I received a phone call from my dad. Now, it was weird because my parents never call me, not because they don't love me, but because they don't want to interrupt me if I'm doing anything or anything like that, so they don't call me. And I had just been at home that weekend, so they had no reason to call me unless I forgot something. So I was confused why I was getting this phone call from my parents. And so I get this phone call, and my dad tells me, Kelly, there's been a problem. Sean was in a car accident. And I left that part out. Sean had a truck. He loved his truck. He really, he just went crazy when he was able to get all these things that he wanted. He had a 4-wheeler, and he bought his dream truck, Chevy Silverado SS, this huge, massive thing. So anyways, he was able to drive. But I received this phone call from my dad. My dad says, Kelly, Sean was in a car accident with his uncle. So I sit there and I'm like, well, is he okay? And my heart just stopped. It was my dad.